Descriptions: Biblical and Theology English courses. Old Testament exposition. Survey of Esther and Ruth. An overview of the theological messages of two often overlooked books of the Old Testament. The providence of God and His rule of the affairs of humanity are examined closely. Survey of Psalms. An overview of the theological messages of one of the greatest books of comfort ever written. The key Psalms are examined as samples of how the book functions. Zechariah. A passage-by-passage examination of one of the most misunderstood minor prophets. The visions of the book are examined for historical and eschatological applications. Judges. A study of the historical and theological message of the historical book of Judges. Attention is given to every man doing what was right in his own sight, and the implications this had for the tribes of Israel and the coming monarchy of Saul, David, and Solomon. Survey of Joshua. A study of the historical and theological message of the historical book Joshua. Practical application is extrapolated from the historically accurate events of the book to the Christian life today. I Samuel. A study of the historical and theological message of the historical book of I Samuel. Practical ministry application is extrapolated from the historical events narrated in the book. 2 Samuel. A continuation of the study begun in I Samuel. Book of Job. The course is an in-depth exposition of the book of Job that brings Job into today's pulpit with practical application and theological insights. Ecclesiastes. A verse-by-verse examination of the wisdom book written by the wisest man to ever live, King Solomon. Isaiah. This course begins with a critical introduction to the book of Isaiah. Included is a scholarly apologetic defense against Deutero and Trito Isaiah. New Testament exposition. Hebrews. A passage-by-passage examination of the book of Hebrews. Attention is given to the warning passages and to the finished work of Jesus Christ. Survey of 1 and 2 Timothy. A study of the theological message of the books authored by the Apostle Paul near the end of his extensive ministry. The qualifications for a pastor is a focus of the course, along with Paul's final charge to Timothy. Advanced James. An unusual approach to the Epistle of James, the oldest book of the New Testament. Rather than approach the book as a message to church-age Christians, the professor examines the possibility of the book's primary message targeting tribulation saints, especially those of the nation of Israel. While controversial, the approach will force students to think outside of the box and to consider sound hermeneutical approaches to the Holy Scriptures. Survey of Mark. A section-by-section examination of the action gospel. The ministry of Jesus is highlighted, along with a study of the passion and resurrection of Christ. Survey of Luke. A section-by-section examination of the gospel of outcasts. The ministry of Jesus is highlighted, along with a study of the passion and resurrection of Christ. I John Jude. A verse-by-verse study of key general epistles. The theological message of each book is examined, and discussion is given to the practical application of the epistles for the saints. Acts I. Acts I covers the first 10 chapters of the book of Acts. Special attention is given to the birth of the church, the day of Pentecost, the role of the church, and the founders of the church. The gift of tongues is examined from a scriptural perspective. Focus is also given to Peter as the primary figure of the early chapters of the book. Acts 2. Acts 2 covers the remaining chapters of the book of Acts. Special attention is given to the ministry of Paul, the primary figure of the latter chapters of the book. Focus is upon the missionary journeys of Paul and upon his writings and teachings. The early days of the church are examined most carefully. Romans. The course is an exposition of Paul's most well-read epistle. It brings a dynamic preaching-teaching style that emphasizes both the doctrinal and practical aspects of the book, making Romans fully applicable to all of today's saints. The student will find this course to be most helpful and informative for defending the Christian faith. I Corinthians. A verse-by-verse study of the book of I Corinthians. Galatians. This course is a verse-by-verse exposition of Galatians. The theological implications are balanced with practical application. The course instructs the student in the relationship of law and grace. Ephesians. The course is a verse-by-verse exposition of Ephesians. The course closely studies the compatibility of Reformed theology with Paul's letter, holding to a view that Calvinism is at odds with Scripture. Prison epistles. A verse-by-verse study of the Apostle Paul's writings from a Roman prison. Philippians/Colossians. The course is a verse-by-verse study of Philippians and Colossians, with special attention given to the contents and doctrinal implications of the books. The course gives the student a basic foundation for understanding Pauline theology.